Bring your cup and take a seat. Fill it up, coffee, wine, or tea. Come find what you're looking for. A good pour.
Welcome back to A Good Pour. I'm Kathryn Good, your host. This is Conversations About Good Work. And today I am thrilled to have Juli Brenning on. And this is just our second virtual podcast. She actually is in Ohio. So Juli, you are the first guest that is not in the Sumner County kind of Nashville area in to where we could meet in person. But I am thrilled to have you. Juli and I have, she was my daughter's teacher and for a semester, I guess, Juli, right? And then you had to move.
Sadly.
And at some point during that, we became friends on Facebook, which I don't usually become friends with my teacher, the teachers, but just lucky enough we did. And we, I started noticing how well you write. I don't know if you remember the story, but I started noticing how well you write. And then Gallatin Chamber was looking for a writer. And I brought you in on that project last year. And at some point during that project, you told us that you had been diagnosed with cancer. And, and I've kind of watched your journey and read about your journey since then on your Substack account. Substack, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you have launched an immersive journal that is beautiful. And I'm so excited to hear you talk about it. So welcome, all that to say, welcome, Juli. I do like to do introductions because it points out how the random interactions of how we know each other can lead us to this point. So,
am I so funny you say that? Just because, just before we started recording, you and I were talking about a book series. And one of the things that is so fascinating that the author, Sarah J. Maas, does in one of her book series of Throne of Glass, I think, is how these little seemingly small moments for her characters, they don't seem like much of anything. They might even be like a paragraph within a chapter. And next thing you know, 3 books later, that one moment of kindness all of a sudden like brings these characters back together. And of course they're slaying dragons and saving the world and all those things, but it's just amazing how that happens in real life. Like tiny little seemingly small moments and acts of kindness and connections. Just, you never know how they're going to like play out and like become something else down the road, which I love that idea.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's why you're here, because we've had lots of small interactions. And so tell me, you moved to Ohio. You were no longer Clara's teacher because you went to take care of your dad. At that point, he was Alzheimer's, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then an entirely new journey started for you. What happened?
It was, it was a lot, which I think is kind of how life works a lot of times. My husband got offered a position in Ohio, which is our home. And it wasn't great timing. It was the middle of the school year. It was the middle of winter. Just none of it was great. But we both had kind of always said to one another, we'll know when we know. And when it's time, an opportunity will be handed to us. And I think also life doesn't happen conveniently, right? People don't get sick conveniently. They don't die conveniently. You don't get transferred conveniently, but the universe does take care of us if we pay attention. And so, I hated leaving mid-school year. That was something that broke my heart, especially because I loved that group of kids. But it was right because of my dad's Alzheimer's, which was just getting worse and worse. My mom was the primary caregiver, and she just needed help, and I needed that time.
Yeah.
6 months after we got here, was it 6 months? No, about 8 months. I still was really getting my footing. I didn't have a dentist yet. I really hadn't done. I was still just unpacking, getting my life we had been in Nashville for 16 years. So and that was our children's home. So it was a really, really big move for us. There were so many layers to it. And then I got diagnosed with breast cancer right before Christmas of 22. So it's been 2 years now. We're just coming on the 2-year anniversary of my diagnosis. Um, and it just turned everything upside down, as it does. It does for all women. And it just really forced me to hit the pause button and to kind of reevaluate everything. And through the process, I still had a dad with Alzheimer's. I
Right.
still had a mom who needed help. My 2 children were trying to figure out their lives. Cooper he graduated from Belmont May of 2020. So like all of his plans got thwarted. Like he kind of got his heart broken. I mean, the whole 9 yards, all the things. And then we moved. So he was trying to get his footing. Mackenzie was a senior in college. So it was just so much to process. And I was a writer before I became a teacher. And I thought I would be like I thought I'd just be writing for the rest of my life. And then, that just isn't the way really publishing works unless you just hit the jackpot. And, but when I went back to teach, I realized really I became a much better writer. That saying, like, when you teach something, you learn it so much better.
Right. Right.
And so having to teach middle schoolers the art of writing, the art of reading, that whole process, you have to break it down so differently. And so it changed the way that I wrote. And so really, when I left the classroom, I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and write. And then all these other things happened. So as an outlet, I just started writing about what was going through, what really life was happening, the day to day. And I became I wrote very authentically, and
Yes.
which is terrifying, like so terrifying to do, because you're like, who's going to judge me? What's going to happen? But I also realized, like, when I don't write authentically, it's not that great, which, we can all see through people who can't, like, when you read something, you're like, okay, that just sort of feels not real.
And so authentic for you, I mean, there's lots of cussing, which, it's just, it has all kinds of feelings behind it, right?
Yeah.
You named your cancer pretty quickly, right?
Immediately. And I don't even know how that happened. I named her Candace. We started talking, and then we really would have conversations. Like I'm like, I might be a little like crazy, but the conversations were super authentic and real. Like we would have coffee and I would talk, because I didn't have to put on any airs. Because honestly, I was just having a conversation. At first, I thought I was having conversations with myself. At some point, very early on, I was like, okay, I might be having a conversation with my guardian angels. Like, I might really, like, these are things. And then that idea of talking to your angels became very real. And I still I think there are moments. My dad just passed away in September, and there are times when I get very lost and I get very sad. And then I think, okay, I can talk to him. Like, I really can.
Yeah.
And when I remind myself to stop and listen to my angels and talk to my angels, it's amazing how much less sad and lonely I am. It like completely alleviates that for me. And so writing allowed me that kind of arm's reach. Like, I could just write this conversation I was having, and then and I could put to words what was in my head and heart, which is also, I think, a really powerful thing for people to do.
Were there days, I mean, that you just couldn't even write? Like, you didn't know what to say? And as a writer, was that even, you know what I mean? Was that just heartbreaking?
Yes. Yeah, it's really hard. It's scary. And I would say most writers would say this. You have these moments when you can't write at all. And then you're like, oh, I'll never write again. Like, it will never come to me again like this. And then it does. So it's like, it's kind of riding that wave a little bit and being comfortable in the fact that today I can't force it. Like this is
Right.
not coming. I'm wildly impressed with writers who sit down and write every single day. Now, I do write every day. It's not publishable writing every day, but like journalists who are tasked with putting out an article every other day, it's amazing to me. Like that's an incredible talent. Now, that doesn't mean it's all good. Nobody writes perfectly all the time, but it also became, and this is one of the things that we're trying to create with this book, and then hopefully subsequent books. I think that there is this. We as women, um, we learn very early that there's some things we should and shouldn't say. And that's fine and that's great. And there are rules to society. But I think what also then happens is our voices get squelched. And then we're not confident in what we think and feel. And we feel like we need validation for how we think and feel. I can't tell you how many times sitting in a middle school classroom and watching little girls in the back of the room get smaller and smaller and smaller through the year. We don't mean to do it. Society does it. I mean, and I have a lot of beautifully powerful, loving men in my life. So this isn't a criticism towards men. I think this is just a societal thing where we need to empower girls to find their voice. I was 53 years old and it took a breast cancer diagnosis. I don't want that to happen to people. And I don't mean using your voice for anything bad or inappropriate. I just mean if you don't know how you feel, if you don't know how to articulate your thoughts, then how do you stand up for yourself? How do you pave your own way?
Well, and the smaller you are, I mean, you talked about the smaller you are, the harder it is to be vulnerable, right? And
Yeah,
so if you are trying to get your feelings out and in an authentic way, just like you did, and you're constantly scared to be vulnerable, but then you have society telling you all of these things, or at least you think it's telling you these things, or you've been taught for so many years. I mean, it's this never ending cycle, right? Like, how are you supposed to be vulnerable and authentic if you feel ashamed to do so?
correct. It's a
Yeah.
vicious cycle. And I think that if you look at you and I, we know this, right? Like I think I could say this to any vocally strong woman out there, and they all feel the same way. So these are vocally strong women. Think about how people who aren't, or
Right.
who aren't in a safe family environment, or who, I mean, we can get the litany goes on of people. If we feel this way, think of how hard it would be for other people.
Yeah.
So I think there's such power in articulating and controlling the narrative of your own story. Because
So
all
you
this other stuff's going on in the world around you. Like I can't control my dad's Alzheimer's or an inconvenient move, or I mean all the things, or cancer. I can control my reaction to it and my how I pen my own story.
and so you use the writing was your tool.
Mhm.
Um, at what point did you decide this is going to be a book, or did you know it? I mean, from the early days on Substack, it really felt like you were, arguing with Candace, right?
Yeah.
Or even, I mean, I just loved how you're like, oh, by the way, I'm still dealing with a father with Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah. Like that didn't go away. Yeah.
yeah,
Like here I am. No, you know what? I was approached by a publisher who found me on Substack, and they they wanted to compile it differently. They wanted me to add, like, do the entries and then add a chapter. And one of the things about cancer books, and there are a million, and they're great. I mean, you can find a breast cancer book for anyone, but they're after the fact. They're not written in real time. And
Mhm.
that is a very different distinction for this book for people who are going through specifically breast cancer, but any other kind of life changing moment. Um, because even now, and I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine, her dad is dying of Alzheimer's, and our situations mirror each other pretty closely. And I'm just 2 months removed, and she put a post out, and I did not react really because I'm already 2 months removed. Like 2 months ago, in the throes of living with losing a dad to Alzheimer's, I was still viscerally connected to that. And now, so my point is when you come out of things, which we all inevitably do, we see things differently, which I think is a good thing, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily as honest as when you're going through it on that day-to-day experience. All that to say, so when they approached me, I really wanted to promote a way of having people read my story, but then only use my story as a guide to find their own story, to write their own story. Because one of the other things that and granted, I was a middle school teacher, but they feel like there's a lot of rules to journaling and to writing. And there aren't, right? Like it can be doodles, it can be um, stickers. There's a lot of different ways to communicate with yourself in that safe place. Um, but I don't think anything can replace that. Like I really feel like it's such a safe place to find your voice because you don't have to share it, right? Like I shared it because I think of myself as a writer, but for other people who are just not writers, you still have a story to tell. And you don't, you can cuss. Like it's okay. But your mom's not gonna read it unless you show her, right? Like,
You can be very real in your writing.
yes, you can. I mean, and it's scary though. Even when I was talking, it was funny, Mackenzie, my daughter, and I were talking about it, and she's like, "You know what I used to love, Mom? I used to love the diaries you would buy me that had little locks. Like, remember those? When we were like, yeah." And I was like, "You're right. That's what we need again." Because everybody's lives are so out there. Like, we need a physical lock on it and be like, "No, nobody can read this unless I choose to let you read it,"
You
which
know what? That's a really good idea. Maybe there needs to be like on social media, there needs to be this little lock button that you can push and be like, it's almost like that. You're supposed to wait a day before sending an angry email or something. Like maybe we just need to lock it. Like we want to write it, but maybe we need to just not quite share it yet.
yeah, lock it up.
Lock
Like,
it up. I love
really? 24-hour rule on that. Yeah.
All right, so you decide so you wanted to do it differently. So is this did you self-publish the book?
So I did what's called partner publishing, which is kind of this new world in publishing, which is great. I mean, and scary. I mean, so I have a lot of autonomy as far as like I was able to control a lot. I was able to control the design. I was like, all that. I had editors. So it was real publishing. They just don't do a lot of the marketing. So the marketing is on me. So that's kind of how this works. But I had published 2 children's books with Penguin. And honestly, they don't really do a lot of marketing. Publishing houses today don't do much marketing unless you happen to just strike it big. And the next thing you know, they'll jump on the bandwagon. I mean, that's just their model. Um, so I thought, well, what do I have to lose? And in this way, I kind of have a little more control. So when the book was finally put together, we kind of dubbed it as this idea of immersive journaling. So you can immerse yourself as much as you want into my story to be able to tell your own.
Yeah. So it is one of my very favorite things to we actually just talked about this in the last podcast is seasons. And how the earth, there's 4 different seasons and the earth goes through them every single year, but yet we like to just forget that we might be going through seasons. So I loved
Mhm.
that you framed this in seasons.
Thank
And
you. I
so
didn't know because it's so true, right?
yes, So tell me kind of your thoughts behind that, or how have a season's been important to you.
Well, you know what? Okay, it's interesting you say that. I have a friend who, a very good friend of mine who grew up as on a farm, and she now is in corporate America. And she said the other day, she's like, you know what? I think it's missing in my life is my seasons. She's like, I'm so like I grew up with the reality of farming is so cyclical. And then you have the winter to let things integrate, to pause, to think, and then it's all hands on deck. And I was like, okay. And then so she and I were just kind of talking about that, but I realized that that's the way I operate, that I have to go through. I can only do really one thing at a time. I'm not great. I can multitask. I mean, all moms can, but I'm not great at it.
Mhm.
I can focus on something. I need to sort of put things to bed. Like one of the things drives me crazy is when people have holiday decorations, if they still have a spider web out and then a pumpkin for Thanksgiving and then Christmas. I'm like, wait, whoa, how do you do that? Like I need one thing to go away. I'm gonna come back. Um, but also trees are very spiritual to me. I love that concept of hardwoods and how they just go through these seasons. Like and no questions asked, right?
Have you? I think it's called The Secret of Trees. Have you read that book or seen that book?
I have.
And how they like there's a whole universe underneath the ground that they talk to each. I mean, it's phenomenal. Anyway, I love trees too.
It's phenomenal. I mean, I love the idea. And I love the idea of like moving in the wind, like all of it. Like it's such a great metaphor for what we experience. You know, I think too, because so much everything. I mean, everything's out of our control. Like I can't control any of it. All I can do is see how I react. And sometimes you don't react great, right? I mean, that's the other thing that I feel like we've put this pressure on us all in society, like to always react the right way, never say something out of turn. I mean, that's not being very authentic. We all mess up. We all sometimes like say something we didn't, it came across incorrect. It's like, I don't know, we're very quick to judge.
Absolutely. So January is winter. Like
Yeah.
you start the book off with it being winter, and then you go into the dead of winter, which and then we're sort of winter, sort of spring. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it is seasons, especially in Tennessee when, I don't know if you remember how many springs and how many falls we have here. But so how's the cancer journey or any journey we go through? How do you see this playing out in this book?
I see it playing out with honestly respecting. I've named it an ordeal of huge magnitude. We all ordeals. And sometimes they're bookended, right? Where there's a clear beginning and end, but not always. I mean, sometimes a lot of times they just sort of drag
I
on and
mean,
you
if your parents get divorced or something, like it never ends, right? Like
never ends. You have to sway with the wind a little bit, right? Like because there are bad days. And then there's days where you're like, okay, I can do it. There was a great article, a quote I saw yesterday. I'm working on this is a project I'm working on, but Neil Gaiman, do you
oh
read?
yeah, that's one of my husband's favorite authors.
I love him. And a quote that he has is, fairy tales aren't real because we slay dragons. Fairy tales are real to tell us we can slay dragons. And that's kind of what ordeals of huge magnitude. They're like the dragon that is presented to us. Like you can slay them, but it's going to take a lot of work. Some days you're going to fail, and that's okay and probably necessary, right? Um and so for me, I think that's like that's just the message of like the give and take of it all. And then one of the things that I wanted to really do too was the table of contents, where this isn't linear. Like, therapy's not linear, cancer's not linear, divorce is not linear. Things don't happen in a timeline. and except when we look back. Like when you're going through it, there's a lot of push and pull going through things. So respecting and honoring that as well, and knowing that everybody's experience is different is also, I think, vitally important to promoting this idea of telling your own story.
So the sign behind me says, "Go slay all the dragons that stand in your way."
Oh my God, really? See?
Yes. Isn't
I
that
love it.
crazy?
Yeah.
Okay, so how this podcast is pouring out good work and telling your good story. And so we talked already about telling your good stories, but what do this journal could be picked up for years to come. I mean, it's a legacy, and I know you want to write more, but what do you want people to do with this journal, this book?
I would like them to find themselves and to know that also you have a choice. Like there are choices to how we write our stories. And there are things we cannot control, but the things we can control, you have a choice in and you have a voice in. Like those things are intrinsic to us as human beings and need to be promoted. And I feel like it also then lends itself to a wider understanding of other humans because ultimately we have way more in common than we don't. I mean, the world wants to divide us constantly, right? Like we're this constant division of politics and identities and um, social construct, all of the things, religious beliefs. But what we have in common far outweighs that. Like, but we don't think about our commonalities. And I think all of that is that's just being good humans. If my story helps you find your voice so that you can tell your story, then maybe you will look at somebody else and be like, they have a story as well. Their skin color may look different. Their sexual orientation may be different than mine, but they are a human just like I am. So they have a story too.
Mhm.
And I just think if we could get down to the basis of that, I feel like we would curb a lot of hate and anger.
Love that. When did you move? What year? 2020? What?
Christmas, so 2021. No, 22. So
You moved?
yes. So I like January of 21. That
Okay.
went because I taught all the way up until the beginning of Christmas break. And then we moved right after Christmas break.
Okay. And
And then
so
I was here almost a year before my diagnosis.
between the kids and your dad and your diagnosis, um,
It's
is
been
there
great.
any yeah. Do you feel like it's slow? I mean, do you feel like it's not I mean, well, no, because your mom is now sick, right?
Yeah, my mom has stage 4 cancer, and this is her 5th
Oh
primary cancer.
gosh.
Yeah. Um, yes, I feel like we're in a fairly decent place, but then, like, I had scans this week, so I'm still waiting on test results. So I feel like too, some of this never ends.
Yeah.
And this is like the season, you know? I mean, my friends and I talk about it a lot. We're in our 50s, our parents are dying, our kids are launching. It's a very
It's hard. It's hard.
and I mean, I don't have anything to do but just pray and hope that what the foundations we've set are strong enough. I mean, it's a very scary thing when your kids are 22, 23, and you're like, and they're figuring it out. And I'm super proud of them. They're both in great places, but it's just, you can't do much. And the reality is you can't do much even in high school. You think you can, but
You
you
can't.
just, you
So
know.
how are you? I know. How are you taking care of you? What's something good you do for you besides writing? Because we've talked about writing.
Um, I try to walk a lot. I really do try to be out and about. I've always practiced yoga, and I've been able to do a lot of yoga. Um, but I'm also trying to be respectful of that integration. Like, I feel like so my dad passed away in September. Um, then we were knee deep in getting stuff done for my mom. Then it was Thanksgiving. Like, I'm trying to honor that I'm tired.
Right.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like where you are right now, and I mean, sometimes you just don't get a moment to be tired. But still, when you don't honor what's happening i- around you, that noise, then it still kind of seeps into you. So you got to like process it and think about it.
Well, it's hard just I mean, if you look at seasons, if everything wants to suggest you're in a winter, but you're trying to be in fall and harvest, like it doesn't really work, right?
Right? Exactly. And you can't control that.
We want to though. We want
Oh,
to get a shovel and go out and dig some, you know, dig up some vegetables and pick some fruit, but it's not there.
I know. All right, that's so funny. I was reading this article about this chef one time, and he was like, "Why do we try to make things with strawberries in the middle of the winter?" I'm like, "Good point, right?" That's what we do. We are desperately trying to make a fresh fruit salad when there's no fruit. But we don't, we've canned stuff for so long that we don't even know. Like we just expect to be able to like plug ourselves, force things. And I guess we always are going through ordeals of small ordeals. There's always something happening, but it's how do you like process? I actually had this whole conversation with myself. I was lying there for a CAT scan and I was like, okay, if things turn south again, which they could at any point, I have to keep moving forward. Like, I stopped my life for 6 months, and I did it gladly, and it was a good 6 months for me, but I don't ever wanna do that again. I wanna find a way to process what's happening and continue moving forward. And that's the other thing with breast cancer. I mean, there's a lot of young moms who don't have a choice. They get diagnosed with breast cancer, and they still have to do what I did and still have babies. They still have to, So, it's just a matter of like, okay, and respecting that people have to sometimes just keep plowing forward.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all about the farm references today.
We really are. That's funny.
So where can people get the book?
It is on Amazon, but it's also on my website, which I would love to promote that. JuliBrenning.com. We are going to start doing a lot of things starting in January. We're going to try to build a community of people and kind of work through the book together. And I'm going to kind of tap back in. I've been working on a quote unquote a curriculum, which is funny. I'm going to try to go back into my like teaching roots and kind of use the power of social media to like build a community and help people really like workshop through it. Um,
Workshop, like going through something or journaling or writing? I mean, all of
All of
it?
the all of
Okay.
the above. Yeah. I mean, like, I have so many ideas. Like, this is like I feel like this is a great book for anybody who's going through a moment, like breast cancer, for example, or a divorce, or like a moment that you're like, "Okay, this is like everything else is peripheral now because I've got to go through this." But so this is a great book for that. But what about a book for like everyday life? What about a book for freshmen in high school? Like, I just feel like there's a lot of ways to connect to different audiences and say, okay, what's happening in your daughter's life is not the same thing happening in my daughter's life at 24, but she still has stuff she's processing. And how does she find a safe place to put that information? I'm not reinventing the wheel. There's journals out there, but there aren't necessarily journals where people are like, okay, how do I use somebody else's story only as a guide to help me tell my own? And then like, how do I slough off all those rules that society's been telling me so that I can really figure out what I want to say?
Well, it's genius because we get so wrapped up in other people's stories, right? That's human nature.
Mhm.
And whether you're watching a movie or reading a book, it could be a quote that stands out. It could be a situation that rings a bell. Like we naturally tie it to our own life. And you're
Yeah,
just inviting them in to do it directly. Like it's not just like random or circumstantial that you're gonna read this and relate to it. We want you to do it, right? And I think it's genius.
thank you. I think that we connect, right? Like
Yeah.
which is like you and I were talking, we connect with characters. So if we think of our lives in terms of like, I think of my life in terms of a book all the time, but that's just kind of, I'm so drawn to books. But there's also this real like connectivity with, if we think of ourselves in this plot that is our life, there's an arm's reach, which is what I did naming my cancer Candace, which is freeing, but it's also allows you to be like, okay, that's nothing but an inciting incident. How am I going to react to that? Like we can say that all the time in a book, right? But
Yeah.
that's happening every day in our lives. So like if we there's I just think there's also a lot of fun to it. Like if I want to create my life in a book that looks like a fairy tale, I think I might have really fun. If I can look at cancer as my dragon, I'm going to look at it differently. And that's the other thing for me, books should be like fun.
Mhm.
You should engage with books. Like I love to write in a book. I love to color in a book. I mean, Claire will tell you, like, I made my students annotate all through books because I believe the more we interact with books, the more they become real. And I think there's just, I think there's a tremendous amount of power in that. I really do. Um, and this is kind of like this freedom. I just think also, again, back to it being fun. Like it doesn't have to be this,
Right.
right?
Well,
Like,
and the book is laid out. I mean, there's pages to journal, but it's not like these really long, bulky paragraphs. They're all spaced out so you can write or draw in the margins. And, it's then you've got these little just script pieces where you're giving your own thought. It's just beautifully done.
thank you.
Beautifully done.
I'm really proud of it. I feel like we did a really nice job. I also love a book when you open it and all of a sudden it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Like if when you're reading a book and you're 30 chapters in and next thing you turn the page and it's just a one-page chapter. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that. Like, and that's the other thing. And I used to say that to my students all the time. Like there doesn't have to be so many rules. Like there's rules to essay writing and all that. Yes. But this isn't essay writing. This is your story.
Yeah.
Like,
Sometimes I just have to, I'll circle prayers a lot, for example. And sometimes I'll write notes out about it or, what my feelings, but sometimes I just have to write a person's name and circle it. And that's all I can do. I
oh,
mean, that's all I
absolutely.
can do. But
Well, there's one thing.
that's still my journaling for the day, right? Or
Yeah,
so there's
I
all
think
kinds of different ways. Yeah.
I think so. And there's one, I think it's in April sometime in the book where I'm like, write a prayer. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was growing up, I was like, well, prayers have rules to them. No, they don't. Why? We stop ourselves cold. People say all the time, well, meditate. Meditating's hard because nobody knows how to do it. And you sit there and you're like, okay. But again, because we have too many rules, like yeah, well, then that was meditating for you, right? And I feel like praying is like that. I'm beginning to find a way different spirituality once I've started to think of this concept of angels. And I love the idea of angels because they're in every single religion. Like it's the one thing that we all like this idea that we have this team. I mean, I think of it as a team. I'm always like, come on, team, we got things to do today. Like, can you
All
hear
the saints
me?
in heaven. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I was thinking about you the other day. When I was writing the article for your story, and you said you needed a printer, and you prayed because you just needed the printer. Am I getting this right?
I
It
don't
was
remember if it
something
was
very specific. Like it was maybe it was. I mean, it was like a very basic thing when you were first starting your company.
Oh,
And
I
then
mean, that's the way. Yes, I prayed all kinds of things and it just magically appeared.
I
So,
know, and I remind myself all the time, I'm like, "Well, Kathryn probably prayed for a prayer, so I can pray for world peace,"
yes, yes, yes,
right?
absolutely. I'll tell you a quick story, and we'll say goodbye, or see you next time. When your next book comes out or the community launches, we'll have to bring you back. But I Caleb, we thought was going to work, and he still has a decision to make on college, but it just relates to this so well. But we were, we always thought he'd go to UT Knoxville. Seth and I both do UT Knoxville, and I at some point I encouraged him to apply somewhere else. So he applied to Stanford in Birmingham, and we have a friend there, and he was like, "Well, I may want to go see the friend," and so he went, and we get out of the car, and I started tearing up. Like I just knew on a gut level that this was the right place for Caleb. And he still may not make that decision. That's up to him. But like it was just this, like, and there's no way I would have adjusted or been even open-minded, really. I mean, I would have gotten there, but I knew I needed this just gut. This is from God. Like, this is what's supposed to happen, Kathryn. And it was right before the election. And I was just like, if God is that kind to give me this sort of, I've got this, this is a good place for him, he can handle this election. Even if I feel like God is not involved in this election at all, like it just, as you said, we're so divided. But I was like, if he can be that kind to give me this kind of gut reaction over my kid going to school, he's got this. So,
I love that, and I love Stanford. We lived in Birmingham before we moved to Hendersonville,
oh, really?
and that's a great school. It's a
Yeah,
great little school.
I think it's probably the place for him. Again, he just got accepted to UT and last night, and so by the time this comes out, we will know what he's going to do. But it just, I will never forget it. Even if the Sanford thing was only to teach me a lesson on, I've got this. But yes, there was all kinds of stuff when the business was first starting. I hadn't had one of those moments in a while, and that was a good one for me. So
And I think that's a great point. Like we have those moments a lot, like when you're like when you were first starting your business, like when you have when life feels really big and you've got like decisions to make. But then we go about our day to day and we forget, and then we're like, oh, I need to be reminded again. But I think that, and that's like one of my daily reminders that I try. Like I lose sight of that a lot, and then I have to like bring myself back and be like, okay, you know.
yeah.
And I do that too. Like I hate the dentist and I had to get a root canal and I was lying there and she's doing this. And the whole time I'm like, I literally had my boobs cut off. Like I can do this. Like I had to like I am capable of hard things. But I
Well,
don't
I mean, that's the hope, right? Like we get hope because we remember what we've already been through. That's
right.
just all there is to it.
So
Well,
if
thank
we never have
you.
anything to go through, then we don't know how to do it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to tell people, if you know of anyone going through anything, this is a great book.
Thank
Great
you.
experience. It's not just a book, it's an experience, I think. And so um and you're allowing people, they can do it personal and lock it up, or they can share it with somebody. And
Absolutely. And I'll keep you posted, Catherine, and you can like let people know as we start introducing different things. We're really kind of getting at it in January. So
well, this will come out in January. So julibrenning.com is where people go.
thank you.
Thank you.